This is the Church of St. Paul in the Desert.
In the name of God, Amen. A couple of weeks ago, I was glad to hear Father Andrew say that he was not overly keen on the book of James. I'm not either. Nor am I particularly wild about Proverbs either. Just forewarned is forearmed, just saying. However, the gospel this morning has significant things to say to us. And so that is where I will spend my time. I would also have to say that the proclamation of the gospel is the task at hand. Now, many moons ago, when I was in college, many moons ago, there's the story that I've heard it before, but it came back to me this past week. There was a young man whose name was Bill, and he was converted while in college. And his uniform of the day, de rigueur, if you will, was blue jeans, a holy shirt, not spelled H-O-L-Y, but H-O-L-E-Y, and no shoes. I don't see anything wrong with that now, but back in the day, it was a little standoffish, shall we say. Well, there was a church right across the street from the campus, and they'd always wanted to have a ministry to the students, but they weren't quite clear how they might do that. And one Sunday, Bill decided to go to church there in his uniform. And as was true of many college students in my day and age, being on time was not an issue. So he showed up a little bit after the service had started. And he walked in and he began to look for a seat. Well, being the more conservative, traditional church that it was, there were some rather askance looks directed toward him. And he kept looking for a seat and got closer and closer to the pulpit area, the altar area, and couldn't find one. So he proceeded to squat down and sit in the floor. Why not? Well, if he thought the looks at him were askance earlier, they got progressively worse. Sitting on the floor, never heard of such a thing. My goodness, doesn't he know? Well, all of a sudden, you heard the click of a cane coming down the aisle. And the usher was a very proper sort, three-piece suit, silver hair, courtly, all of the above. And everybody knew what he had to do. Everybody knew the task at hand. How dare this young whippersnapper? How dare? So the gentleman got closer and closer to Bill, sitting there on the floor, cane in hand. And he gets up close to him and carefully lowers himself onto the floor so that Bill is not sitting by himself, where there was absolute shock and silence. And the preacher, who had not started his sermon, made the comment to the congregation, "You will never remember a word I say, but you will never forget what has just happened. Be careful how you live your life, because you may be the only Bible some people ever read." Sometimes I remember those good old days. Not so much. Old, yes, good, no. The central point of Jesus' comments to the disciples are summed up in this story. It is a reminder of who you are and whose you are, and your calling to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. We sometimes get things really messed up. For those of us who grew up back in the days of the aughts, and there were lots of aughts. Don't go to church without a hat on. Ladies always wore dresses. Don't enter late, for heaven's sakes. You might disturb some people. These were all aughts in a variety of places, some common and some not so much. I learned at an early age that that was not necessarily the rule of the day, because my memory of St. James Leesburg was that there was always someone who came in about 20 minutes after the service had started, maybe about the time of the confession, maybe the Venite, depended. Morning prayer was the service of the day. And she would carry under both arms the Washington Post and the Washington Star. She would come to the front pew, sit down, use the mortuary fan a couple of times, and then proceed to pull out a section of the paper and read it during the sermon. So, all things being equal, it is the nature of the world in which we live that we often lose sight of what Jesus invites us to be and do. To be the beloved children of God. Again and again and again, that invitation is offered. And we somehow lose sight of that. And we do as the disciples did. Who's the best? Who's the wisest? Who's the prettiest? Who's the most educated? Who knows more than anybody else? And we consistently begin to measure ourselves there. That's not the model Jesus offers to us. There is the story, and one I found fascinating. We've heard a lot in the 40-odd years I've been ordained about servant ministry. And one makes an assumption that that was created in the church. Not so much. In 1970, an AT&T executive by the name of Robert Greenleaf wrote an essay entitled "The Servant and Leader." Greenleaf did not write his essay for pastors or Sunday schools. It was for executives in the hard-nosed business world. He coined the term servant leadership and spent the last 25 years of his life writing and lecturing about servant leadership. He was brought in as a consultant at institutions like MIT, the Ford Foundation, Ohio University, and in his 40 years of management, he discovered that the great leader is first and foremost a servant to others. True leadership emerges from individuals whose primary motivation and desire is to help others. Good leaders, Greenleaf observed, desired first to serve others. Servant leadership transforms people, it heals and makes a difference. It brings meaning and purpose to others. And it's not idealistic mumbo-jumbo. Consider the number of companies who have adopted servant leadership as part of their mission statement. Toro Company, Service Masters, the Men's Warehouse, and Southwest Airlines. TDI Industries, a large national construction company, was one of the earliest practitioners of servant leadership, and they were recently ranked in the top 10 of Fortune magazine's 100 best companies to work for in America. Servant leadership. The model that Jesus offers to us again and again, time and again. And in the midst of that last little pericope in the gospel this morning, Jesus brings a child into the midst of the disciples. A child, innocent, without blemish at some level. Kind of like the 3-year-old body that was found on the shore of an island in Boston Harbor this past summer. Her name was Bella. You heard about her. She annoyed her mother and her boyfriend, so they killed her. Children were at the very bottom of the pecking order. They still are. And we tend to get annoyed because they make funny noises, very often happy noises, but we get annoyed because it's different. But children are our greatest resource. And if you forget that, where would we be without children in the future? Just saying. It was one of the reasons that in the years that I was at St. Agnes in Banning, and it was significantly smaller than St. Paul's, but children took up the collection regularly and ushered regularly, i.e. every Sunday. As soon as they could read, they read lessons. And the prayers of the people. Because they offer us an example time and again of an innocence we unlearn as we become more mature, because we're grown-ups, you know. The gift that Jesus invites us to hear and to be is the beloved children of God. And we're called again and again, invited again and again to come to this table, to partake of this bread and wine. I would have older members of the congregation get upset because I was very orthodox in my understanding of children at communion. From the time they were baptized, they were admitted. And I would hear, well, they don't know what they're doing. They don't understand what that's all about. And my pat response was always, every time you come to the communion rail, I want an explanation, a theological explanation of what it is you're doing here. I stopped the questions, because more often than not, all they knew was that they needed that. And if we tell our children that they need to drink their milk, eat their spinach and peas and carrots, or whatever, because of their physical need for nourishment, don't they need spiritual nourishment as well in their journey in faith? Jesus' use of this child is a reminder that we are all welcome, and we are invited again and again, and reminded again and again that we are the beloved children of God, and we are all welcome at this table. Amen.